Hi there, welcome back to my channel. So, a lot of you have been asking me, what does it cost to live in Atlanta? And how does Atlanta compare to living in other cities? So I did a little bit of homework for you and we're gonna get straight into that. I am Christa Coore-Powell, Atlanta Property Pro. And if you're interested in learning about living in Atlanta, remember to subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions about relocating or moving to Atlanta, like lots of people do who reach out to me all the time, please do not hesitate to give me a call or shoot me a text and we can get together and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So let's talk a little bit about living in Atlanta, Georgia and what cost of living is like. The Atlanta property market has always been a really attractive one just because, you know, people like living in Atlanta. The weather is really nice. As a girl who cannot handle super cold weather, Atlanta winter is about as exciting as I can manage, if I'm being honest. In addition to that, you know, busiest airport in the country, growing economy. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video, just some of the different businesses that are coming to the city. Overall, it's a really attractive place to live. Lots of universities are here, lots of research is happening. The CDC is based here, lots of really interesting stuff. And so for that reason, Atlanta is a pretty attractive place. So if you're thinking about moving here, let's talk a little bit about what that's gonna cost, because that's important if we're considering moving to Atlanta, Georgia, right? So as of June 2024, the average cost of a home sales price is around $420,000. And that's gonna vary according to neighborhood. So if you live in a less expensive neighborhood, you can find a home for around $300,000. Maybe you're gonna be giving up things like school districts, access to some of the maybe better shopping, or maybe you have to drive a little further to get to shopping. Maybe you live a little bit further from the airport, a little bit further from the city center. Those are all things that are gonna impact that. But average, if you wanna think more high end, there's definitely stuff in the millions of dollars. You could definitely get a brand new home, new construction even, for under $300,000. You just may be a little bit further outside of the city. The way that Atlanta is set up, we have the perimeter, which is Interstate 285, and then you're gonna have in the perimeter and out of the perimeter. ITP and OTP is what the Atlanta natives like myself call it. And so that's gonna impact to a certain extent the cost of your home. In terms of rental prices in Atlanta have actually gone up a little bit. And the average rent in Atlanta is between $1,500 to maybe $2,300, $2,400 a month. Again, depending on how you acquire the rental, the type of rental it is, where you're located, of course. And there are lots and lots of options. And it's always interesting to me that people think they automatically have to buy something when they move here. It's always a good idea to rent too, you know? Like start off with a rental so you kind of figure out what area you wanna be in and then make a purchase. Either way I can help you, so feel free to give me a call. The number is right up there. If you're thinking about purchasing a home, the next question that comes up, especially for people who've lived in states that have very high property taxes, will be property taxes. So property taxes for that same $420,000 property, you're looking at about $4,000, and Atlanta Metro property taxes are gonna be a combination of the city and the county. So say for example, I live both in the city of Atlanta and in Fulton County. So I have taxation coming from both. For that same $420,000 home, like I said, you'd be looking at around $4,000. But if you go a little bit south, it might be a little bit less, say somewhere like Fayette County. Now you're looking at maybe $3,700. So not a massive difference, but a little bit of a difference. And that's important when we're thinking about mortgages and how much we are going to be paying on a monthly basis. The other thing you want to think about when you're living somewhere is, what does it cost to keep a house running? So now we're thinking about utilities. So like the average utilities for a 915 square foot apartment, so about 1,000 square feet, you're looking at around $189 a month. That's gonna cover, you know, your garbage, heating, water, electricity, not things like internet. That's obviously gonna be a little bit more. Now, if we're thinking about a single family home, what we're looking at there is about, and I wrote this down because I wanna make sure I give you guys accurate numbers. For a single family home, average monthly electric around $130. I would agree with that. That's probably my average electric, and there's one other person who lives in my home. Atlanta is not a city that's all electric or primarily gas. It's a pretty good mix. So it's possible to have a house where everything's electric but your stove. You have a gas stove because that's something that you're looking for. So that definitely can even vary within a neighborhood. For gas, you're probably looking at about $100 a month. Water can cost, depending on how many showers you're taking and how many things you're washing, $70 to $80 a month. That really does depend though on the size of your family. Again, as I said, there are 2 people living in my house. I'm probably doing maybe $40 a month. Internet can cost anywhere, I've seen as low as $60 to as high as $150, kind of depending on the plan you're with. In Atlanta, we have Verizon, we have T-Mobile, we have Google, we have Xfinity, AT&T. All of them provide internet for the home, and that will vary depending on the neighborhood that you're in. But all those providers are available. Basic cable, you're looking probably, I don't know, like $85 a month. I cut the plug years ago. I'm a streaming girl, but asking friends, doing some research online, that seems to be about right for just a basic cable package. What you also want to think about is when you're purchasing or renting is insurance. So you have home insurance. You have renter's insurance and homeowner's insurance. Renter's insurance I've seen as inexpensive as $25 a month. And it really, again, depends on what kind of coverage you're looking for, the size of the apartment or building or home that you are trying to cover, the content value, things of that nature. When we're talking about homeowner's insurance, now for that same $420,000 house, we're looking at about $2,300 a year. One of the nice things about living in Atlanta is we don't have a ton of natural disasters, unlike, say, South Florida, where, hurricanes are an annual concern. We don't have really awful winters, so you're not thinking about like really bad blizzards or really bad snow. In addition to that, you are not dealing with tornadoes, touch wood. We do have tornado warnings, but so far, thankfully, nothing like what you see maybe in some other states. So Georgia tends to be pretty light on the natural disaster spectrum, so we don't have a ton of that. Last winter, it did get a little bit colder, so there was maybe a week where there were signs everywhere to make sure that you left your tap running a little bit so that you didn't have your pipes freeze. But in general, that is, a handful of days out of the year, the exception. In terms of your homeowner's insurance, you're not dealing with a lot of issues that maybe people are dealing with in other states. I will say though, in the summertime, when it gets super hot outside, because it is the South, your light bill will probably go up a little bit. The other thing that is always a concern, especially in a city like Atlanta, is transportation costs. And I say especially in a city like Atlanta, because Atlanta is in flux, in my opinion, when it comes to transportation and where we're headed. Atlanta definitely started out as like a bunch of little towns that sort of are all merging together. And so traffic is a bit of a concern. Okay, traffic is a concern, but they're definitely working towards improving that. And there's a bunch of stuff happening, especially in light of the fact that we're gonna be hosting several of the matches for the FIFA World Cup in 2026. And just with the volume of people coming in, there are some changes that are being made to enhance local transportation. So let's start with public transportation. So in the city of Atlanta, you're talking about MARTA, which is the Metro Atlanta Regional Transportation Authority. I remembered it. We should be very proud of me that I remember that. So what you're looking at for MARTA fares is you're gonna have to purchase what's called a Breeze card. And then you can refill however much money's on that Breeze card for 3 years. A Breeze card is $2 and then you can reload it as often as needed. If you buy a single use one, it's $1. So no matter what, you're paying for the card. And then you can add as much as you need. So a one-way trip is $250 and then you can purchase a 1-day pass up to a 30-day pass. The 30-day pass is $95 and the 1-day pass is $9. So a lot of variety there. And for those of you who don't generally take public transportation, one reason you may take public transportation in Atlanta is if you live a little bit further out in the burbs and you want to come into the city to go to an event, say at State Farm Arena, which is where a lot of large concerts are held. That's where Beyonce, when she was here 2 nights, she had her show there. In addition, we have the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is hosting a lot of those same World Cup games that I talked about, but that's where the Falcons play, and it's also where Atlanta United plays. We have other events there as well. And so those are pretty close to each other, and they're in an area where parking can be a little pricey. And so it may make sense, and also just time-wise, may be easier for you to catch the MARTA into town. The other day, I actually went to a Copa America match with a friend and 2 other friends came to meet us. They live further outside of the perimeter. So they drove in to closer to the perimeter. The first train station they got to, they parked there. here, parking is usually either free and or super cheap. And then they just took the MARTA from where they were into the middle of town where we were. And there's literally in between State Farm Arena and Mercedes-Benz, there's a MARTA stop right there. So really convenient. You don't have to deal with traffic or anything. So it's a nice option, even if you don't use it regularly for event transportation. Now, gas prices matters to me because I'm a realtor. So I'm driving around in these real estate streets. Gas prices in Atlanta are pretty reasonable compared to other parts of the country. Went on a trip and I had to buy a tank of gas in California. Y'all, when I say about died, like that was intense. So, average cost of a gallon of regular gas in Atlanta as of this month is about $3.33, which is cheaper than the US average of $3.50. That is, I think, a nice little savings and something helpful to keep in mind. All right, so now we have a car. We put gas in the car, but we want to drive legal. We're not riding dirty, so we are going to have car insurance. As of July 2024, average cost for car insurance in Atlanta is about $11.61 for a 6-month policy, or just under $200 a month. That's going to vary from vehicle to vehicle, and obviously based on age and driving history and so on and so forth. And you definitely want to shop around for that because different companies maybe have different offers. But big picture average, according to the online sources that I followed, said about that. Now, dining out. Let's talk about eating out in Atlanta, because a good reason to move here is food. There are lots of different types of restaurants, lots of levels of restaurants. We have Michelin star, we have Michelin recommended, we have, hole in the wall mom and pop spots, we have really good barbecue, there's Caribbean food, there's Indian food, there's Asian of all kinds food, Latin American. Like there's such a diversity of food here. And so you could eat out like all the time. May not be the healthiest option. My dietitian would probably recommend you didn't do that, but if you wanted to, you could. So we're talking anywhere, I would say you can get a meal, anywhere from maybe $12 all the way up to $80 easily, just depending on the restaurant that you go to and the neighborhood that you're in. And if you get cocktails, don't get cocktails. But I think reasonably, if you were anywhere from $12 to $80, you can definitely, per person, you can get a meal in Atlanta. Now, sales tax. Taxes in general are always a question, because if you're coming from a state that doesn't have state income tax, you may be a little put off by the fact that Georgia does have state income tax. Or if you come from a state where certain items like clothing, for example, don't have sales tax, that might also be off-putting for you. So let's just clear the air and put that out in the open. I used to live a long time in Florida. Florida does not have state income tax, Georgia does. And when I moved from Florida to Georgia, I will be 100% transparent with you. I did not see a noticeable difference in how much money I was really bringing home, and I'll tell you why. Because the other things like gas, cost of certain amenities worked out to be a little bit cheaper. And so for that reason, I didn't notice the income tax that I was paying. So the income tax that Georgia requires you to pay if you either reside in Georgia or you receive income from a Georgia source ranges anywhere from 1 to 5.75%, depending on how much you're earning. I'm not a CPA, so if you have any more questions about that, I recommend you talking to a CPA or a licensed tax professional. Now, for sales tax, Atlanta has a sales tax of 8.9%. And that's because two of the larger counties, so we're talking Fulton and Cobb, have 7% sales tax, and then there's an Atlanta rider on top of that, which is 1.9. So 8.9% in total. If you go to other counties a little bit further out, that will vary a little bit, but they're not gonna be any less than 5% because Georgia itself has a 5% tax. Sales tax rather. So those are all important things to keep in mind. How are we paying for all this? Employment. And I think this is generally speaking, when I do speak to people, when people reach out to me, what's one of the main reasons they're coming here? Because they got a really cool job offer. They're interested in a new start, and Atlanta, seems like a nice place to live. They want to know about what the job market is like here. Now, I'm not an HR specialist, but I can tell you what I've been hearing in the news and what I know for a fact is actually going to be happening in Atlanta. According to the University of Georgia, Atlanta's job base has increased 5% since early 2020. According to them, this is the 5th highest rate in the nation, so the job market is growing. The top 4 other cities were Austin, Dallas, Vegas, and Orlando. So again, really desirable places to move to, and Atlanta's right up there with those. In addition to that, a personal finance website called Wallet Hub compared 182 US cities based on 26 key indicators of career friendliness, ranging from monthly average starting salary to the availability of entry-level jobs and housing affordability. And they ranked Atlanta as as the #1 place to start a career in the country. So I think that's a really, really optimistic rating. I really enjoy that. Apparently, this is the second year in a row that Atlanta finished #1. In addition to that, some major industries and companies have established a really solid footprint in Atlanta. So for example, Cargill, which is a global food and agriculture logistics leader, they're establishing a hub in the city of Atlanta, and that's estimated to create about 400 new jobs. In addition to that, just south of Atlanta, the US Soccer Federation is gonna open a training facility, which will definitely bring people from all over the country, because that's gonna be super attractive, especially as soccer gains prominence and popularity in the country. And Target just opened up a new distribution center about 20 minutes south of downtown Atlanta, maybe 30 minutes if there's traffic. Atlanta has been named one of the top cities for startup businesses in 2024, according to the real estate website HomeBay. So what you're looking at is a lot of reasons why employment should be pretty strong in the city. And when you pair that with relatively affordable housing prices, it's a pretty nice place to live and pretty doable. The last thing I want to point out, and just because this is important to me, is gym memberships. So a CrossFit girly, I like to lift heavy things and put them down. And I do think wellness and fitness is really important. So it's also a question that comes up with my clients. What do gym memberships cost? And you know, we have chains that are as inexpensive as $10 a month, and those are all over the place, all the way up to more boutique sorts of experiences that'll cost you upwards of $100 or $200 a month. The full range is really there depending on whatever it is that you're into. So thank you so very much for joining me to talk a little bit about what it's gonna cost you to live in the city of Atlanta. Please, 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 if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And thank you so much for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe and get the little bell so you get a notification when I post a new video. Thank you, thank you. Talk to you soon.